Shady NDAs, glossy propaganda, empty deals with the government. There are abundant signs that the American AI industry is scared, terrified, really, of everyday people who haven't totally drunk the AI Kool-Aid. The industry is baldly desperate for you and regulators to think that AI is super cool and really American. People are waking up to the fact, though, that AI data centers are draining communities of power and water while failing to deliver on all of the things that they promised. With spiraling energy prices and growing data center cancellations, I think the industry is going to have a hard time fixing its image. The backdrop of this story is the fragmented and highly localized energy landscape of the US. The supply and transmission of electricity in this country is made up of a mix of utilities, grid operators, and a patchwork of local, state, and federal regulations. To give historical context, growth in demand for energy in this country had largely been flat until pretty recently. The introduction of AI data centers threw a wrench in that, however. Recent years have seen surges in demand as more and more behemoth data centers come online. This has led to big spikes in energy costs. The average national price of energy has increased by 267% in the last 5 years. Energy demand from data centers here in the US may soon rival that of the entire country of Poland. Some states like Virginia that have a lot more data centers have experienced much larger price hikes. The stress on the grid has been so severe that experts have been warning of blackouts for a while now. Water has been similarly impacted. Data center companies love to construct their digital ghost towns in rural areas often already prone to drought. Although the supply of water and electricity is a national concern, the impacts of data centers occur mostly at the local level. Let's say that a data center uses too much water or electricity, and it causes air and noise pollution. The people who feel it the most live wherever that data center was built. This is where the first sign of the AI industry's fear comes in. It seems like data center companies have known for a while now that their gargantuan projects might eventually end up an object of scorn. For years now, many data center companies have been using a mix of non-disclosure agreements, or NDAs, back-alley political deals, and opaque shell companies to get their data centers constructed. The shady data center playbook looks something like this. A big tech company like Meta or Microsoft wants to build a data center. They usually look for areas where land is cheap and electricity rates are affordable. This often means that they find land in rural areas, and especially rural areas in the desert where water is already scarce. The plus side of this is that rural areas are prone to agreeing to these data center deals. They often are served by smaller governments that don't have a ton of experience dealing with powerful tech companies. They also commonly have economies that are strained by aging populations, globalization, and tumult in the agricultural industry. So big fancy tech companies come to town and start knocking on the doors of elected officials and landowners in search of favorable rezoning, tax breaks, and land. Understandably, it's hard for these communities to say no. It turns out people don't like having local farmland and forest ripped out to host a giant concrete box that emits loud sound all day. They also don't appreciate their energy bill multiplying or their tap water turning brown. One recent study by Pew found strong negative feelings among US respondents about data centers' impacts on energy costs, the environment, and quality of life. The use of NDAs is, in my opinion, especially insidious here. I read story after story, mostly from local news outlets, mind you, that described the same situation over and over again. A big tech company would approach elected officials at the town or county level and ask them to sign an NDA. That agreement would then largely bar the elected officials from talking about the data center project. I want to emphasize how messed up this is. Elected officials, who are supposed to serve their communities, including by providing them information, have been signing NDAs that forbid them from talking to their constituents about proposed data centers. How is this even legal? In multiple cases, different sets of elected officials serving the same general community, as in county officials versus town officials, would have different levels of information. The mayor or city council might not know about a proposed data center, for example, but county officials signed NDAs and were coordinating with a tech company to get the data center built. Regardless of who knew what when, the local residents are invariably the last to know. Often this means that data centers get the green light before local residents can meaningfully fight back. Let's look at one example of how this played out. Beaver Dam is a town in Wisconsin of about 17,000 people. There, local officials signed an NDA with Meta in 2023. The NDA doesn't refer to data centers at all, it merely refers to a project. It also instructs the signers, the officials, not to reveal discussions with Meta or the existence of the project at all. The officials then went through a series of secretive steps to get the data center approved and constructed. This included a 12-0 vote in July 2024 to approve the pre-development of a data center. Again, the agenda and meeting notes of that vote don't mention a data center. In November 2024, officials created a special tax district for the data center. The agenda and meeting notes once more do not make mention of a data center, though the agreement setting up the district did. Then, in February 2025, more than a year after the NDAs had been signed, the officials announced a potential data center project. But did they disclose the company behind the data center? No. A news report in April 2025 identified Meta as the company behind the whole project. 8 months later, in late 2025, Meta confirmed the existence of the project through, get this, a Facebook post saying that they were honored to be building a data center in Beaver Dam. There's one especially spicy line from the news report on this that I want to read to you now. The first reply to that post was from a Beaver Dam resident who wrote, "We would have been honored to have the opportunity to decline this." Stories like this are not unique. It's difficult to know how many NDAs have been signed to facilitate the construction of data centers. A separate study found that at least 25 of 31 data centers constructed or proposed in Virginia were facilitated by NDAs. An expert behind that study supposes that this estimate is actually an underestimate because NDAs are so secretive by nature and hard to uncover. Companies have defended their use of NDAs by saying that they help to protect their intellectual property and plans from competitors. To add insult to injury, NDAs aren't the only thing keeping communities unaware of data center shenanigans. I already mentioned the deceptive note-taking and agenda setting in Beaver Dam. In many locations, big tech companies have also used LLCs as shell company intermediaries, meaning their names aren't immediately associated with a given project. Because nothing says you're proud to build a data center in a community like showing up to negotiations with a paper bag over your head and a gag order in hand. Additionally, the NDAs often extend to local government records, such as agreements or other documentation signed by a community. One detailed investigation into the impacts of data centers found that many of the records they requested through local and state records requests were heavily redacted. This included documents that discussed water use, the resource that the whole community shares. In my opinion, it is hard to view these NDAs, LLCs, and redactions as anything other than big tech companies fearing the communities they seek to commandeer. The good news is that many localities and states are considering bans on these NDAs, and even bans on data centers altogether. To some extent, I wonder how much negative sentiment these data center companies are causing just by being so secretive. If they hadn't used so many NDAs, it's possible some of the residents in these communities would have welcomed data centers. Just a thought. Despite all the NDAs, the cat is out of the bag. Data centers have become the word du jour almost as much as AI itself. Anti-data center belief is affecting elections outcomes throughout the country, with the main antagonist being high energy prices. Big tech companies are well aware of this too. In November 2025, Meta rolled out an interesting ad campaign focused on data centers. A series of ads depicting data centers in Altoona, Iowa, and Los Lunas, New Mexico had an unequivocally positive outlook on the massive buildings. Let's take a look at the one on Altoona. This ad feels like it was engineered in a nostalgia Americana factory. Cute little storefronts with jangly, nostalgic guitar music in the background. A diner with overt references to small town life. Shots of cornfields being harvested because America is corn and corn is America. The narrator says that when the economy took a turn for the worse, the community welcomed Meta with its data center and jobs. The jobs part of this is critical. We'll touch more on that later. The ad closes out with a high school football game because, again, America, and then flashes this vague stat that Meta is investing $600 billion in American infrastructure and jobs. That's it. That's the ad. There's no mention of energy prices, water scarcity, or the fact that these data centers at their largest are about 1,000 times larger than your average football field. I want to dwell on the stat that the ad flashed at the end. $600 billion invested in American infrastructure and jobs. In trying to figure out what that actually meant, I looked at a Meta webpage that claimed the same stat. The page had more generic information that didn't really explain what it meant. Like, how many full-time, long-term jobs does that equate to? What kind of infrastructure? Does it benefit the communities that the infrastructure is in at all? These questions are important to ask because $600 billion invested in infrastructure and jobs is a vaguely feel-good stat. After all, $600 billion is a lot of money, no matter how you slice it. The issue is that stat doesn't hold up to further inspection. Data centers are primarily only job creators for the temporary construction workers who build the site to begin with. After they are built, data centers host a shockingly low number of full-time workers. One study I looked at said that even the largest of data centers, which have campuses that stretch into the hundreds or even low thousands of acres, have at most 120 full-time employees. The jobs per square foot ratio there is atrocious. Remember when I called data centers digital ghost towns? That's because these data centers are massive, home really only to endless rows of GPUs running machine learning and inference. If, like me, you have any skepticism towards the capabilities or actual worth of generative AI, you may view these data centers as pointless data phantoms. They exist to prop up the AI myth, and that's about it. Should the bubble pop, what happens to these sites? Do they just sit and rot in the desert? It's not clear that the silicon inside them has any purpose other than running and training AI models. Bubble aside, these data centers are not job-creating machines. The infrastructure part of that $600 billion stat matters too. A lot of the infrastructure being built for data centers is just the physical data centers themselves. To be fair, there are a lot of transmission lines and even some power plants being built. Without data centers, would those communities need that additional infrastructure though? Furthermore, do people like it when their utilities invoke eminent domain to build massive transmission lines on their property just so a data center can get power? Probably not. The clearest explanation I got on this stat came from a New York Times article that referenced Meta saying it would invest $600 billion in building new data centers in coming years. To be clear, there is a big difference between spending billions on data centers that primarily benefit a single company and investing billions in helpful jobs and infrastructure. If we want Meta and other big tech companies to invest in a helpful way, maybe we should, I don't know, tax them? A final note on Meta's data center ad campaign. It was targeting state capitals, giving the appearance that Meta is trying to sway the legislators that may seek to regulate data centers. Other data center companies like Amazon, Digital Reality, QTS, and NTT Data either have already debuted their own ad campaigns or are planning to. These pro-data center ad campaigns run alongside more general pro-AI ad campaigns, which we saw a lot of during the Super Bowl. I've even seen slightly subtler forms of pro-AI propaganda in other places. Take this pro-data center editorial piece by the Bezos-owned Washington Post, for example. The piece decries people seeking to regulate data centers as either NIMBYist populists or political chameleons who just follow whatever political opinion is most popular. It goes on to say the US must win the AI race with China, whatever that means. It also dismisses concerns about water or energy use as overblown or merely logistical hangups that can be easily solved, like with empty deals with the White House. More on that later. Taken in total, I think the AI industry now is desperate to win over regular people and legislators alike. What's really funny in like a schadenfreude type of way is looking at all of the anti-AI comments on these data center ads on YouTube. I truly do not think this industry knows how cooked it is here. These obvious propaganda moves run the risk of alienating people even further. The PR problems of the AI industry are severe enough that the White House has felt pressure to intervene recently. The US government has been pretty heavily pushing AI and data centers for a while now. In the last few months, though, the White House has explicitly tried to shore up data centers and mitigate concerns about AI-induced energy price hikes. At the beginning of this month, the White House hosted representatives of the biggest AI companies to sign this non-binding agreement that would prompt the companies to pay for their own energy use. The non-binding quality of this agreement means just that, though. No actual repercussions will happen if any of these companies break their promises. Many of them had independently said in recent months that they would try to pay their own way with rising energy needs. Seemingly, the whole point of this event was just another propaganda move, this time led by the US government to try to whitewash data center energy use. The performative motivations of this event were explicitly addressed by both proponents and critics. The president himself said, and I quote, "Data centers, they need some PR help." An expert on AI energy use described this event as theater and said that the only meaningful action on this issue can come from either Congress or utility regulators. Unfortunately, prospects of congressional action on either data centers or energy costs seem slim this year. Between the hollow nature of this agreement and conflict in the Middle East increasing energy prices even further, I'm not sure how either the US government or the AI industry is supposed to get out of this mess. The more data centers get built, the more communities will experience power and water shortages. Already, billions of dollars of investments in data centers have either been canceled or delayed because of pushback in states like Arizona, Indiana, Oregon, and Virginia. More everyday people are organizing movements to push back against data centers. Likewise, many advocacy organizations are paying close attention too. The industry will probably keep flailing, showing just how desperate and fearful of everyday people it really is. If this is something you care about and want to get involved in, there are lots of ways of doing that. A lot of the reporting here I looked at cited submitting public records requests to towns and counties asking for agreements and NDAs with data centers. You could do the same in your community. Similarly, you could show up to a city council meeting and ask your representatives what they know about data center interest in your community. You could also share this video with people you think aren't aware of this issue. As an anecdote, the handful of people I've talked to about AI NDAs were horrified to learn about the secretive dealings of these data center companies. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.